Hello, my name is Elian Ramos and I'll be your host today. We are back with the Hangouts. I've been off the air for a little bit because I've been very busy. But today's Hangout is the perfect way to start the series again. A couple of months ago in December, we had the United Nations Paris Climate Talks, and the topic was environmental justice, and we have seen how after the Paris climate talks, this topic has taken a whole new renewed relevance. And last week, the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, better known as NHLA, which is a nonprofit coalition of 40 Latino-serving organizations, they just released their 2016 agenda. And the agenda lists priorities to address the most pressing issues affecting the Latino community. And among those issues is the environment this time. And so today I will be talking to the group of experts that helped to shape that agenda. And we're going to be talking specifically about the tenets of the environmental and energy agenda for 2016 that they have added. And so I have with me today a very special group of people. First up is Hector Sánchez, who is the chair of NHLA. How are you, Hector?
Very good, Elian. Thanks for the invitation.
It's so good to have you here. Next up, I have Jose Calderón, who is the president of the Hispanic Federation. How are you, Jose?
Great. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I also have here Bruce Goldstein, who is the president of Farmworker Justice. How are you, Bruce?
Good, thanks for having me.
And last but not least, a very special lady who works tirelessly for the environment is Vanessa Cárdenas, who is the director of Latino Outreach for the World Wildlife Fund. How are you, Vanessa?
Thank you. Very happy to be here with such a great group, Alain. Thank you.
So let's start the conversation. First up, I would love for you guys to kind of explain what is it that that you do in your work and what your organizations do. So who wants to start?
I'll go first because I'll make it really quick. The World Wildlife Fund is one of the world's largest conservationist organizations. We have a presence in over 100 countries, and we cover the range of issues related to conservation, from wildlife to forests to oceans, and obviously climate change is a big issue for us. And the connection that we have with the Latino community in the United States is that we obviously are very much aware of the growth that the Latino community has in the U.S. and sort of its influence. But the World Wildlife Fund also has a huge presence in the region. We actually have offices in 15 countries in Latin America, and our presence is actually very substantive. Our largest offices are in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Guatemala, and we really care about what's happening in terms of climate change and all environmental issues, not just in places like Africa, but also in the Americas, which is why we feel that connecting with the Latino community and engaging with them is a key priority for us.
Okay, perfect. Hector, you want to tell us about what you do and what your organization does?
Thank you. Obviously, my first role is I'm the Council for Latin American Advancement, which is LACLA. I like to call it the organization that represents Latino workers in the nation, the interests of Latino workers in the nation. And my second role, which is the invitation that I received today, is I'm the chair of the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, which is the coalition of some of the 40 most important national Latino organizations in the nation. This is a space of collaboration. This is a space where we all come together to create priorities for the Latino community and present a public policy agenda. And we're very happy that last week we presented our public policy agenda for 2016. This is the blueprint of priorities that we have as a community for the next 4 years. We also build campaigns around the priorities of this agenda, and then we present it to the administration. We put pressure on the administration. We go to DNC, RNC. We work with the Congress, and we're so excited that in this 2016 public policy agenda, there is a section, an entire section on the environment and energy. So this is a call to action on these issues, and we are very excited to join forces with everybody. And I'm happy here to join our co-chair, Jose Calderón of Environmental and Energy Committee, and also our fantastic leader, Bruce Goldstein, also from the Economic Empowerment Committee, which, as you know, affects all the issues of our working families and our children and the future of our families.
Beautiful, beautiful, and I can attest to all the great work that both NHLA and LACLA are doing for our community. Next up is Jose. Jose, tell us a little bit about the Hispanic Federation.
Well, thank you again for having me. You know, I do everything that Hector tells me to do. That's my job.
We all do.
We all do, right? My second job is to lead the Hispanic Federation. The Federation is a nonprofit membership organization made up of 100 community-based organizations, all Latino-led. We work to advance the social, political, and economic interest of the Latino community. We do that through nonprofit capacity building, what we call organizational development assistance, through public policy advocacy, and through community programs in 6 key areas, right? So education, immigration, healthcare, economic empowerment, civic engagement, and of course the environment.
Wow, 60 different areas. We didn't even know we had that many issues, right?
I have whatever Hector tells me to do.
We have more issues than Vogue. So let's hear a little bit about what Bruce does. Bruce, what is your organization and what do you do at Farmworker Justice?
Yes, thanks. I'm Bruce Goldstein with Farmworker Justice. We're based in Washington, D.C. Farmworker Justice was founded in 1981. It's a national advocacy, litigation, and education organization. We help farm workers and their organizations. We try to improve immigration policy, labor rights, wages and working conditions, occupational safety, health, access to health care, and access to the justice system. We have attorneys and health professionals on staff. We work with community-based groups all over the country to advance their interests in the nation's capital and federal agencies and in Congress. We also do capacity building with community-based groups, especially around health and occupational safety, to create community health worker programs, promotores de salud programs around pesticide safety, environmental health, HIV prevention, and enforcing labor rights. And we're very pleased to be on the board of directors of the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, and I'm pleased to co-chair the Economic Empowerment and Labor Committee with the head of the National Council, La Raza.
Wow, very important work. Thank you so much for doing that. So let's start the conversation. Some of us just attended the Paris climate talks. I mentioned it briefly in the introduction. But what I've noticed is that the intensity of the conversation about the environment and about climate change that was going on during the climate talks kind of has subsided by now. Can you tell me, Vanessa, I'm going to start with you, but feel free to jump in, everyone. Can you tell us why it's so vital to keep this environmental conversation alive, particularly for Latinos? Do you have any statistics that you can share, like any information about the Latinos in particular?
Sure, and I should start by clarifying that WWF is not part of NHLA, but we're obviously very thrilled that NHLA and its policy agenda this year has an environmental section, and we're very much supportive of all the organization's efforts to make sure that this is a key part of the overall Latino agenda, especially this year. But to your question, Elian, I think it's important first to understand that the COP last year was sort of a global effort to bring all the countries together to first of all agree that we as a global community need to take steps to address climate change. Climate change is having a huge detrimental effect in all countries of the world, but particularly in those nations that are struggling the most, developing nations. And obviously, our communities are part of those developing nations. And I think that what's significant with the COP agreement is that virtually every country in the world agreed that we need to take action. They all agree that we need to, first of all, take important steps to address climate change, that we need to slow global warming, that we need to create funding so developing nations can actually adapt and mitigate, that we need to take care of our forest, and most importantly also that the whole global community needs to reevaluate their plans for adaptations every 5 years. Now I know that all sounds very complicated. The question is, how does our community fit into that? Well, our community fits into that because Latinos in the United States are one of the communities that are feeling the most impacts of climate change. And I know that Hector, Jose, and Bruce are going to speak more to this, and I'll just give you a few numbers. Because of the California drought last year, over 20,000 jobs were lost, mainly in the agricultural sectors. Now, who works in those jobs is our folks. Another example is in terms of the health impacts. 40%, Hispanic kids are 40% more likely to die from asthma than non-Hispanic kids. Again, another example of how pollution is really affecting our community. And then when you think about the states that are feeling the most impact, when you think about where people live, the states that are feeling the most impact are states like California, Texas, and Florida. States where 55% of the Latino population in the U.S. live. So the point being that our communities are really at the center, at the epicenter of the climate change impact. But it goes farther than that. I talked to you about how WWF works in Latin America. Well, the impact of climate change in our countries of origin is also hugely detrimental. Another example is that last year, in 2015, more than 21 million people in the region were affected by extreme weather and drought. Just in Central America, almost 13 million were affected. And when you think about countries like Costa Rica, when you think countries like Colombia, Panama, they are all also dealing with issues like sea level rise. In El Salvador, for example, or Nicaragua, all these countries, more than 30% of their population live in the coastal cities. So when you think about how climate change is impacting our communities and how it is going to impact them in the future if we don't take action, it's really scary. And so our theory in terms of the work that I do, and I forgot to mention that the initiative that I lead is called Climatico. It's really to bring to light how important it is for the Latino community to really take a stand on these issues and make it a crucial part of the political conversation, of the advocacy conversation about how our communities are suffering the impact. So, I think it's really important to realize that this is not just a domestic conversation, but it's a regional conversation and obviously a global problem. So I'll stop there because I'm sure others have lots to say about it.
And if you guys want to add anything to what Vanessa just said, I know that you're very committed about the community and the obvious ties between our community here in the U.S. and the communities in Latin America. If anybody wants to jump in right now, that would be great. If not, I'm going to continue with the conversation. And I would love to turn it to Hector now. As Vanessa mentioned, this is the first time that NHLA included an environmental section to the policy recommendations that you make every year. So first of all, explain to us what is the NHLA agenda that you just launched, and why did you decide as a coalition that you wanted to include an environmental section in this edition?
We're very happy to see all of our leaders from the 40 national organizations coming together at a time when our community has been under such a horrible attack with all these anti-immigrant pieces of legislation, all this anti-Latino kind of mobilization in the nation with some of the presidential candidates that have been really affecting the quality of life in our community, hate crimes against Latinos keep increasing, racial profiling. So the unity in the coalition has been fantastic, and that is why I think we have the strongest public policy agenda that we had as a coalition, very inclusive of a number of issues. And the environment is one of those examples, very strong with gender issues, very strong with the LGBTQ community, very strong on a number of issues. Actually, I invite people to take a look in our website, NHLA, National Hispanic Leadership Agenda. But when it comes to the environment, I think it's also reflective of what is happening with our community. like Vanessa say, our community is actually facing some of the most serious issues when it comes to climate change and the environmental issues that we face in our communities. We are the ones that live next to the factories. We are the ones that are suffering from asthma, or children are suffering those situations. We are the ones that maybe see the situation in the mountains, in the rivers, etc. So I think as a community and as a coalition, we're really understanding that and know that the environmental issues are such a top priority. Now, this is a tool for action, as I say. This is not just a document that is going to be sitting in the bookshelf. This is a guide for the 40 national organizations to really build campaigns around these critical issues. And from the political point of view, this is also, and we all are nonpartisan, we are here to just really highlight the priorities of the community. But we're also presenting this agenda to all the presidential candidates. We have a presidential engagements campaign under NHLA where we meet and we invite all the presidential candidates to come and engage in conversations with us around the Latino priorities in the nation. And we really push them to give us an answers when it comes. And I want to be very clear, the presidential candidates, all of them need to understand on the environmental issues, climate change, and all of these issues that are central for the nation are also a top priority for our community. Last week, we also released a questionnaire of 20 questions that was sent to all the presidential candidates. It's a very interesting time because all of them claim to worry about the Latino vote. Mm-hmm. So with this guide, we actually asked them to show where they stand when it comes to the Latino priorities, and there is no better guide in the nation than our public policy agenda that we just released.
And the beauty is that because there's so many organizations, that all the top leading organizations are involved in this. This is really a group effort from people that really care and work for our community the whole year, no, not just during the elections. So thank you, Hector, for that. I think it's such important work. I want to talk now to Jose because I know, Jose, you were deeply involved in developing specifically the environmental part of the NHLA agenda. So I would love to hear a little bit from you about what are some of those key provisions that were included specifically for the environment and why they are so important for our community. And also, if you could talk to us a little bit about the opportunities of moving to a clean economy for our community that you are recommending in those provisions.
So, Elian, thank you so much. I mean, we're so excited, as Hector said, to be able to include the environment in this NHLA public policy agenda. It's an issue that is critically important to our community. It has always been an issue of critically importance to our community. So we're very excited to sort of, increase the Latino voice in this space. One of the major topics that we covered was environmental justice, EJ. For us, right, the environment, as Hector mentioned,
we're having a little trouble hearing you.
That's what happens when you live in New York and the access is not that great over there. I've been in his office. We cannot hear you, Jose. Maybe we can start with Bruce. Well,
so let's move on to Bruce, because Bruce also has a great part in making shaping what the environmental policies are for the NHLA agenda. And Bruce, I know that your work has more to do with labor, with farm workers' work, not necessarily with the environment. But explain to us what are some of the occupational environmental health challenges that are experienced by the farm workers and their family members, and what is the correlation of that with the environment? But also, one thing that I loved about the NHLA agenda in the environmental piece is that they included how Latinas are usually hurt the most. So talk to us a little bit about all of that and how that comes into play within the environmental work that you're all doing.
Yes, thanks. We represent and assist farm workers, the people who work on ranches and farms to produce fruits and vegetables and tend and raise livestock. And the people who work in fruits and vegetables especially are often working in fields that are treated with pesticides. And many times those fields are sprayed with pesticides. And frequently, people who do that work live in communities that are adjacent to those fields. I have stood in a field that has a chain link fence at the end of it, and on the other side of the chain link fence is the schoolyard, the elementary playground, school playground. And when the pesticide is sprayed, it can drift onto the children and their schools and onto the farm workers' homes. There are many pesticides that are used in agriculture, and unfortunately many of them are quite dangerous. They cause cancer, serious birth defects, neurological problems, skin rashes, eye infections. Pesticides are very dangerous for people and for the environment. The NHLA agenda helps to address those issues by saying that there needs to be stronger protections about what pesticides are allowed to be used and how they're allowed to be used, and stronger protections for farm workers so that they are informed about what pesticides are being used and how to protect themselves against exposure and what to do if they are exposed. So we do a lot of work at the advocacy level in the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Labor, and other agencies as well as Congress to strengthen protections and to strengthen the enforcement of the protections that already exist. There was also mention of climate change. As was mentioned by Vanessa, many farm workers are living in rural areas and often in California, where about a third of all farm workers live. And they and their family members are often living in these communities that have been directly affected by the drought. And what's happening is very often, not only do they have a lack of water, but their homes are, some of them have purchased homes, and their homes values have declined. No one's going to buy the house when there's no water available in that neighborhood. So besides the health consequences, there are very serious financial consequences. Also, in many other parts of the country where farm workers live, there's a lack of infrastructure that means that they don't have adequate access to sewers, to safe drinking water, and it's poisoning the environment in which they live. Farm workers face a lot of discrimination in the labor laws that are applicable to most other workers, and we try to overcome those barriers. So we're very appreciative that the NHLA coalition as a whole endorses granting farm workers some of the same labor rights that other workers have, and specifically addresses the issue of pesticides in the workplace, in agriculture, and other environmental hazards.
Very important, especially there's so many of our people who are working in this area, in this work area. So it's very important to include them, and thank you for doing that. It seems like we have Jose back. Jose, are you there?
Yes.
I don't know what's going on. We're in a bad Wi-Fi area, so my apologies. Anyway, so I think what Bruce said is super, important, right? Obviously, we want to, we're a community that's exposed, right, to all these toxicities. We're exposed to all this degradation environmentally, and we want to make sure that we have, like any American or any human being, right, access to clean air, access to clean water, access to a healthy environment, and we're not oftentimes, right? So I think for us, part of it is sort of the environmental justice fight that we.
Oh my goodness, again. You're breaking up again.
Well, let's continue. Let's continue because I think Hector can also talk a little bit about the provisions since Jose seems to be having a little trouble. So Hector, walk us through some of these provisions that are included in the agenda, and then I have a follow-up question for you, but if you want to go ahead and do that.
No, there is no doubt, and it's great to have Jose. He's been leading this with Roger Rivera and other people. And before I get into that, I really want to commend the leadership of Jose, Bruce, and others, really bringing attention to a lot of the issues. Bruce was talking about the worker standard protections, and He's very modest and humble, but we had a recent big victory, and it shows why the collaboration is so important. Farmworker Justice, some friends from Air Justice, the great Andrea Delgado that has been working so much on this. Yes. All of your organizations. Last year there was an announcement on the worker standard protections that are going to be stronger, which is very important when it comes to the groundwork, and we need to keep putting pressure on those. But from the agenda, obviously, we have a strong focus on environmental justice, everything related to climate change and the energy, everything related to conservation. And I think the general message is to engage Latinos in the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws and regulation policies. I think that's the general message that we want Jose to convene when he gets a Wi-Fi in his office. But in another element, I think it's also reflective of the priorities of the coalition. I think last year not the coalition, the community, there was a recent poll in which we joined with Green Latinos and Air Justice. LACLA, we host them here in the building under NHLA. And the poll really shows what is happening in the nation. Our community is facing a lot of these problems or issues. And when we were asking questions about water, about climate change, about the environment, the polls were showing that Latinos strongly care about these issues. Now, if we want to put it in the context of something that is happening right now, let's talk about the issue of what happened in Flint, Michigan. I think that is something, that is an environmental issue, or people or families are drinking water that is poison, and this is something that unfortunately we may see in some other areas, so it's important to be organized, it's important to be aware of what is happening, and it's important to put it at the top of priorities to make sure that this is not happening in different parts of the nation. Jose, are you back, brother?
I think I am, but I'm afraid to speak. Anytime I speak, I'm like, I get
No, this is perfect. It happens every time we have a hangout, so don't worry, you're not the only or the first one, so it's good, it's all good. Go ahead and tell us about the provisions then while we have you.
Well, let me, again, I don't know what part of, because I was talking, and I don't think you So the big three areas for us. Did you lose me again? Big three areas: environmental justice, climate, which is a big piece for us as well too. I think Vanessa talked a little bit about climate change and the importance of that, and then conservation, which is really critical.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, he was able to explain a little bit. I'm very happy for that.
But Elian, can I also mention that I was really excited to see the Clean Power Plant in as part of the recommendations, because I think that's such a central part, especially when we talk about climate change, of what the United States needs to do to sort of fight back. Power plants contribute to over 40% of our carbon emissions, and what President Obama is trying to do is, for the first time, regulate power plants, which is kind of amazing to me that we've gone all these years without regulating the biggest polluters in our nation. So I think that it is exciting that Clean Power Plant is included, and it is our hope that we will work together to make sure that all the states implement the power plant completely in the near term.
Especially now that it's becoming so crazy and so politicized, and that it's under consideration by the Supreme Court. So I think it's great that you're all working together in putting pressure so that these things really are put into place. So that's a perfect segue to the next question, because I want to ask Hector what the coalition is doing, not only to bring awareness within the community, which I think is essential, but also to bring awareness to the legislators that this is a priority for our community and that we need this to get done, especially in light of all the politicizing that is happening during this electoral campaign. So what are the things that you are doing, and what are the next steps now after the launch of the agenda?
Yeah, the next steps are full action. The agenda allows us to build campaigns around those priorities. We have campaigns around immigration, Latinos United for Immigration Reform, around the economy, Latinos United for Economic Empowerment, around healthcare, around education, around all the issues that are such a an important priority for our community with the support and the base of all these 40 national Latino organizations. The next steps are very clear. We're going to go to DNC and RNC. We're going to have events with all these 40 national leaders to present the priorities and the agenda, and obviously the environment and energy is one of those priorities. But at the same time, this is the guide that as advocates we all can use when we go to Congress. As you know, we have very strong efforts when it comes to Congress. And we also release a congressional scorecard to really see when it comes to the Latino priorities and all priorities that, by the way, are also reflective of the priorities of the nation. We can really map where each one of those legislators stand. And we use this for action in terms of voter education. We do a lot of civic engagement programs in the nation, and my brother Jose Calderón cannot speak, but I speak on his behalf because Hispanic Federation we joined forces with Hispanic Federation, with LULAC, with NCLR, with Mi Familia Vota, Voto Latino, Latino Victory Fund, and number, I don't want to miss any of them because they're going to come back at me. But we have a table of engagement with 9 national Latino organizations in which we are going to go to the ground and really talk about the issues of civic education, and this is one of those issues. I want to give opportunity to my other colleagues to speak. I hope we have Jose back.
So Jose, now that you can speak, let's get you on the spot here. So let's talk about, if you want to add anything to what Hector just said. I know that you've been essential in very, you have a very priority role in all of these discussions. So tell me about that, and also tell me about the recommendations in terms of worker protections, which is something that Bruce touched upon and Hector also mentioned. And it seems like we lost him again. Oh, God.
Maybe I'll chime in.
Okay, yeah, chime in, Bruce. You see, I love this teamwork. You can all cover it for you, Bruce. Go ahead.
I always take advantage of the silence. On the farm worker issues, we do go to Congress and we go to the Environmental Protection Agency and the White House and other agencies, along with our allies, including NHLA and Earth Justice, the United Farm Workers Union, and many others. And we have an agenda. People might be interested in a report that is available on the Farm Worker Justice website. It's called Exposed and Ignored. And it's how farm workers are being poisoned by pesticides, but it's got recommendations, and we're working on several of them. As Hector said, we succeeded in one important one. We got a new worker protection standard on pesticides from EPA that it issued in November, and now we need to implement it. We're trying to ban a particularly toxic pesticide, poisons a lot of farm workers, called chlorpyrifos. It's been banned for household use. It should be banned in agriculture. We're trying to get Spanish language labels on the pesticide containers that are out in the fields in agriculture, because most of the people who work in agriculture now are proficient in Spanish, but not necessarily in English. They need to understand the warning labels on the pesticide containers. And we're also trying to do other things, including to win more resources so that these protections that do exist are enforced by the EPA, by OSHA, and by state agencies. And finally, I just wanted to also mention that all of these issues really are interconnected with immigration policy. Right. The majority of farm workers are undocumented immigrants. Yeah. And as a result, they often are afraid to speak up about the exposure they are experiencing to pesticides, about the water shortages that they're experiencing due to climate change and drought. We need immigration reform so that people have a true immigration status and roadmap to citizenship, so that they can exercise the freedoms that this country is based on.
And we just saw, I think it was at the end of last week, the news that came out that some workers were actually sprayed while they were still working in the field, including children. So that's some horrific news. So the work that you are doing is extremely important. Especially because they may not be aware that this is happening, or they may not be aware that they have rights, like you mentioned. And so speaking of these, I haven't seen any discussion, or barely any discussion, about these from the candidates or from, during the debates, the topic of environmental justice barely makes any appearance in any of these discussions that are happening. What do you think the effect or the impact is going to be about this topic on the general elections that are coming up? Because right now we don't see any play, but as we know, this is a very important topic to Latinos. There's been polls that list environmental issues as one of the top topics for our community, yet nobody is talking about this. And how is it going to impact the elections, and how can we make sure that that happens? Anybody can chime in. Vanessa, I know that you're very passionate about this, so you want to take the lead.
Right. Well, I think what I would say is that you're right that this issue has not gotten the coverage that it needs, which is why it's exciting that NHLA has included it, because I think it gives it additional sort of weight on why it is important. I think that to the extent that the conversation of what happened in Flint has been focused mainly on the African American community, and I think we sort of need to expand that conversation. But I think what Bruce has said is really what's important. It's that the environmental justice issues have direct connections to other issues that the Latino community is facing, whether it's lack of status, whether it's health issues, whether it's economic issues. And I think that it's really incumbent upon all of us to really sort of bring to light those connections, that this is not a silo issue, and it's not just about the weather, but it is about people's livelihoods, about people's health, about people's economic situation. And I think to the extent we can point to those junctures, that would be super helpful. So I think that moving forward, for me, that's sort of the challenge, and I hope that one day NHLA has a campaign that's focused on sort of the environmental issues, and maybe climate change specifically, because it is so broad.
No
but
pressure, amiga, right?
Huh?
No pressure.
No pressure. Just a small ask.
Sí se puede.
Right. So I think that would be amazing. But I think that, this is a hugely important issue for our community and for our kids, for the future. What kind of planet we're going to leave to our kids, what kind of country we're going to leave to our kids. And I think it's like Hector said, about sort of the concern that the community has. It's palpable, it's there. The question is, how do we harness it so it's elevated to where it needs to be?
Brava. I think this is the most important, and you mentioned something very key, all of you, that all of these issues are connected. And I think as long as we make sure that the community and the people out there and the politicians understand that all of these issues are related and they're not isolated, then we can make a lot more impact and mobilize people to really act. And so, speaking of mobilization, I know that we are a little bit over time here, but I always like to finish the conversations with a call to action. So what can people who are watching right now do to support the NHLA agenda, but in the broader sense, to support the work, the amazing work that all of your organizations are doing? How can we get involved? So, feel free to let us know about any upcoming opportunities for engagement that you have, or anything else that you feel is necessary to convey.
If you want me to start, I have homework for those colleagues that are watching. First of all, download the agenda. It requires a lot of really fantastic leaders in the nation from 40 organizations, their staff, the communities that work with those organizations, to really all of us come together to create this agenda. This is reflective of what is happening in our read it. We have the most important experts from education, health, environment, a lot of the different issues in migration to put this together in collaboration with our base and the communities and the families and the children, really understanding what is happening. So read this. The second ask is civic participation, with no doubt, is the solution to a lot of the attacks that we have as a community. And environment is one of those priorities. We need to mobilize. We really need to engage in the democratic process and raise our voices, talk to legislators, mobilizing our community. It's not only about the presidential election, which is very, very important, and we can be decisive as a Latino community. But the more we engage in the democratic process and civic participation, the bigger we can the bigger is the saying that we have, and when we're talking about the environmental issues, is also one of the big priorities of our community.
Okay, Vanessa?
Well, why don't you let Bruce go first, since I've talked too much. I'll go last.
Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, a couple things that people could do is visit the Farmworker Justice website, read our report, Exposed and Ignored, about pesticides, and look at the recommendations. We have campaigns going on to get the EPA Administrator, Gina McCarthy, to continue some good work she's already done for the end of the Obama administration. You can take a look at our Facebook page and Twitter feed. Those often ask for help. Send a message to the EPA and to members of Congress to help improve environmental health of farm workers. And you could just get informed and support these efforts and go out and vote.
Exactly. So now, Vanessa, you want to have the last word?
I would really underscore what both Hector and Bruce have said. I think really downloading the agenda and reading it through, and really sort of sharing that is really important. I think that really engaging in the political process is key. I mean, I'm sure that your audience knows the stats, but in the last presidential election, only about 11 to 12 million Latino voters turned out, but there are actually almost as many who are eligible to vote. So, we only about 50% of the Latino electorate actually comes out and votes. So I think we really need to make a focus on making sure that people are participating at every level, and that, as Hector said, it's not just about the presidential election, but it's also sort of what's happening at the state and local level. And I would end by saying to visit our website, climatico.us, is where you will find information about the work that we do. One of our biggest actions is around the Clean Power Plant, and really pushing our governors and state level officials to fully implement the Clean Power Plan, the sooner the better. So those are sort of the things that I would highlight.
Beautiful, and I would like to thank you all for taking the time. I know that we went a little bit over time, but this is such an important conversation. I didn't want to cut it short or leave any of your voices out. I want to commend all the work that you do every single day for Latinos in this country and abroad. And I want to really urge our viewers, the people who are out there, to heed the words that these leaders are telling you, because it's so important. And beyond the political leaning that you may have, it's just important to become engaged and to really voice your concerns and to vote and to get engaged every single day, not just during the elections. So that's going to be my last word for you. I want to thank you all for watching today. I want to thank Bruce and Hector and Vanessa. And also Jorge, I know that we lost to Jorge, but we appreciate all the work that you do as well with the Hispanic Federation every day for this country. I want to leave you with that, and I will see you soon again here. In the meantime, get out there and get engaged. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Gracias. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.